I'm a senior technical architect at Salesforce, so I work with customers and help them do implementations, and I do lots of DevOps and command line stuff and that sort of thing too. Okay, so first, let's make sure you're in the right place. What is the command line? And if you know what it is, you might be thinking, well, this isn't 1982 or 1992 anymore. But believe it or not, the command line is still a very useful tool to know and use. And it's not just for tech head developers. Anyone can learn to use the command line. Behind the scenes, most of the things you're using, behind the scenes, it's either executing the command line or executing similar things to what the command line is doing. And I'm a consultant, so you get this extra coolness factor when you walk into a customer and you sit down and you fire up a terminal and they just stand back and they're like, okay, let them go. Obligatory Dilbert cartoon here. I'm a Unix guy, so here's a nickel kid, get yourself a better computer. Okay, so introduction to command line. If you don't know what the command line is, it's a text-based interface that you use to interact with your computer. In Unix, and DOS has very similar ones. PowerShell is a little closer to Unix. But there's some basic commands that you want to know just to navigate around. So there's a command called ls to list the files and directories. There's a cd command. There's a pwd command. This is like, where am I? And you type pwd and it'll tell you where you are. Because it's really easy to get lost when you're moving around and stuff. You don't know where you are. Pwd will save your life. Creating directory, removing files, copying files, moving files, so basic stuff. And then clear just clears the screen. So again, some basic commands. I'm going to be using these as I do stuff. Oh, another cool command I like to show people is the history command. So once you've typed in a whole pile of commands and you're like, what the heck did I just type? There's a command called history. You just type history and hit enter, and it gives you a big long list of all the commands you've been typing in. And so that's really useful. You can pipe that to a file or something and save it for later, so it's always cool to have that around. And then most commands have arguments. So you have a command. Some commands run all by themselves. Some commands require arguments. You'll find out pretty quick when you try and execute a command if it needs arguments or not, because it'll complain and it'll tell you, hey, this isn't working. But most commands have arguments that modify how they behave. Because it's the Salesforce, we're going to talk about Salesforce Command Line Interface. So it's an interface tailored for developers and admins, and it helps you with automation, deployment, management of Salesforce environments, and some basic commands for this. Again, there's lots of commands. So I'm not going to go over all of them, but some of the basic ones you're going to want to know. There's sforg list. So if you're working with multiple orgs in your environment, like I'm a consultant, I'm working with multiple customers sometimes. I sometimes have 20 orgs that I have registered, and my sforg list tells me all the different aliases that I've given to these orgs that I don't remember anymore. So sforg list is really important. When you want to authenticate with an org, there's authweb login that lets you connect to an org from the command line. There's a project generate command. This is kind of your starting point for a Salesforce project. You use the project generate, it creates the directory structure, and that's where all your metadata files are going to go. And then there's commands to retrieve data from an org. There's commands to deploy data to an org. So we're going to go over a few of these in just a sec. And you might think, well, why do I even care about this? For Salesforce, I use VS Code. Yes. The reason is VS Code provides some of the CLI functionality, but not everything. So everything you can do in VS Code, you can also do from the command line. But the reverse is not true. There are things that you can do from the command line that you cannot do in VS Code. And therefore, even if you use VS Code most of the time, it's still, every once in a while, you'll need to jump to the command line to do something. I find that running commands from the command line is actually safer than VS Code, especially when I'm interacting with an org. So if I'm going to take some metadata and deploy it to an org, it's really easy in VS Code. You right-click on it and say, go to org. But the one thing you want to be careful of is that you're connected to the org that you think you are. And at the bottom of VS Code, it's like this little area that tells you what org you're connected to. And that's the org you're deploying to. So if you happen to be connected to prod at the time, and you right-click and say deploy to org, you just deployed something to production. Maybe you didn't mean to do that. So you want to be really careful. With the command line, you have to tell it, deploy to this org. It's a command line argument that you have to give it. So it becomes more explicit, and I find you're less likely to make erroneous deployments by doing that. So, some demos. I was playing around earlier trying to find the right color. Hopefully this works and everyone can see everything. Okay, so just some commands here. The ls command lets me see what files and directories are here. The cd command lets me change to a directory. Now, one of the nice things about the command line, you might think, oh, I don't like typing that much. But once you type enough to disambiguate what you're gonna do, you can press the tab key and it actually completes the command for you. And this works for the Salesforce command line as well. So I'm gonna go here just because this is a project directory. If I say ls, you can see if you're familiar with the source directory structure, that's what this is here. There's a command -r, which you can give to the ls command. And that lists it's a recursive list, so it actually spits out everything. Kind of annoying if you have tons of stuff there, but if you just want to kind of see the structure of things, there's another command called tree, which shows you the tree structure of things. So that's these are kind of cool things that you can do with the command line. So if I do sforg list, for example, I can see the orgs that I'm connected to. And so here I have, oops, that purple's a little hard to read, but I have various orgs here. You can see I have some Scratch orgs. I have a Scratch org that I created for this demo, but I have different orgs that I'm connected to. sforg open is a useful command. This opens up the connection that you have to an org. So you can see it's a little hard because I've made the screen font kind of big here, but at the end of each line, it tells me if it's connected to that org or not. And if it says connected, that means I can open up that org. So sforg open -o mh24 scratch. We'll open up that org in my browser. So this is something else I use the command line for all the time. It's almost like a password manager. I don't generally even log into orgs. I go to the command line and say open, and it just opens it up and I'm ready to go. You can even pass it the page that you want to open. So if you want to open to a specific page, you can do that from the command line too. It just opens it up in your browser. So this is the Scratch org that I have created. Yes? I'm sorry?
Does that get around MFA when you log in that way?
So when you connect the command line to the org, you're going to have to go through MFA. But once you have that connection, then you basically are bypassing MFA to do that. Yeah. Back?
Yeah. Can you open an org with subscriber access through the command line?
Can I open an org with subscriber access? What do you mean?
Someone has given me access to their org. Can I open it in the same way as they can?
So if you've registered that org with the command line, then yes, you can. You don't have to be an admin or anything. You can connect to whatever org you can connect to. You can do that. One of the cool things, and I do this a lot with Scratch orgs. So Scratch orgs, if you're not familiar, are an org that's created that's basically private to you. And you don't even normally have a password for a Scratch org. You really only have this connection that you use. But every once in a while, you want someone else to connect to that Scratch org and and do something. And so if you pass in the -R option, it actually spits back a URL, that green thing at the bottom there. And if I give someone that URL, it's like that front door JSP, I can paste that in like a Slack message to someone. They can click on that and they're in that org as me. So if I needed someone to do something in the Scratch org, this is often how I'll do that. I'll just paste the, now of course this is dangerous because if you give them the production URL, this is the URL here, if you give them that production URL, then they're you in production. So definitely want to be careful about what you're doing there. Yes?
Earlier you had a different -R command show up that kind of listed out the different metadata components that you have in the org.
Yeah.
Today, does it show relationships between them, or just kind of like lists?
Now that was the ls command. That's a Unix command. It just lists like the directory recursively.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so it doesn't show any relationships between metadata or anything like that. Yes?
Can I specify user? Because I can see that there's like default user test, blah, blah, blah. Like, can I have like multiple users? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
two profiles? Or
Yeah, so the question is, can you have connections as different users?
Yeah.
And
One hour.
yeah, absolutely. So you would just register a connection multiple times with those different user accounts, give the alias. So when I do sf org list, the first, the thing that's in all caps there, Flowsome Scratch, MHD 24 Scratch, that's just an alias that I've assigned. It's private to my computer and stuff. So if you had a use case where you needed to be able to connect to an org, maybe to do testing or something, so you want to connect as test user A and test user B, and you don't want to have to be constantly switching and stuff like that, you could totally use the command line and just create different aliases for the different users you're connected as. Every user you connect as would be a different entry in this org list. So these are all connections to totally different orgs, but I could have 20 connections to the same org just using different users. Okay. Okay, so some of the cool things you can do with commands. So commands let you do something, blah, and it spits it out to the screen. You can take the output from a command and redirect it to a file using the greater than symbol. So if you run something and it's like scrolling on the screen, that's not super useful, but you could redirect it to a text file and do something with it. What I'm going to show you here is something called piping. And piping is that straight up and down character, and it lets you take the output from one command and use it as the input to another command. So other commands that you often use here are sed, grep, and stuff like that. I'm going to show you a demo of this. So one of the commands I use a lot is this sf org list metadata. So I'm just going to use it here. So sf org list metadata lists a particular metadata type. It lists all the things of that metadata type in the target org. So I do this a lot when I'm like creating a package XML and I need like a set of fields and stuff that I want in that package XML. I'll use this and I'll say, okay, spit out the custom fields. And here it spit out all the custom fields in this org. Now, this is a nice human readable, when it's a little smaller, table. If I give it the JSON flag, it spits it out as JSON data. Now there's a lot of information here. It tells me what user created the field, when it was last updated, so lots of information here. But what I want for a package XML is this thing called the full name. So what I can do is I can take this and grep out full name. So I'm taking the output from this command, and rather than having it spit to the screen, I'm parsing the output and pulling out only the lines that contain the string full name. And so that makes something a little bit easier. Now, let's say I only care about, what I'm interested in are the fields in the contact object. So I see lots of stuff here that's in objects that I don't care about. So I'm also going to grep for contact. So now it'll narrow it down to just those fields. And in this case, there are 2 custom fields in the contact. So then I could pipe this through other commands. So like this whole thing here, I got an example where I can pipe it through multiple commands here. There's like sed command, and a cut command, and I'm making a package XML, so I want this members, the field name, and then /members. And then I just take this and throw it in my package XML. So I do this sort of thing a lot. So piping is really super useful. Next, we have scripting. My general rule is if I'm going to do something more than once, I'm probably going to write a script to do it because I don't want to have to keep typing that thing in over and over again. So you can take the commands that you're going to execute, and if you don't remember them, there's that command history. That'll give you all the commands that you type. So a lot of times you'll test things out. Hey, yeah, this is working really well. This grep sed thing that made the members fields, I like that. Now I'm going to put it into a script so it makes it easy to run later on. And so you put the stuff in a file, and then you run that file. That's a script. What kinds of things should you script? Basically anything that's repeatable. Anything that you're going to do over and over again, I would say throw in a script. If it's something you're going to do one time, it probably takes more time to write the script than to just run it and do whatever you're doing. But I find that I almost never just do things once. I'll do things one time, and then somebody will say, oh, could you tweak it and do it a little bit differently? And then I can just go back to my script and modify things a little bit. So things that are repeatable, anything that is part of an automation is also something that you could script. And a lot of automation tools, what you're doing is you're actually writing the commands inside a script inside that automation tool. There are things that shouldn't go in a script, though. So things like credentials. So a lot of times you'll take your scripts and you'll upload them to a server somewhere. You don't want credentials in those scripts because then now anyone who has access to that can get it. So you want a prompt for those sort of things. At some point, scripting can become programming. So you could have things that you run in the script, things like, and these are like Bash and PowerShell scripts. But sometimes you need to do more processing. So you saw the output from the SF command can be formatted in JSON format. Well, that's really powerful. That could give me the ability, there was things in there like the users and stuff. So I could easily write a Python script that would take that and then find all the fields that were changed by a particular user on a particular day, or what fields were updated in the last 2 days or something. I could write a script that would easily do that for me. So whatever scripting language you like, Python, Ruby, Node, Java, whatever you like. A lot of it depends on what you're familiar with, whether there are third-party libraries that help you do things like JSON parsing and stuff. Most languages can do that. Okay, so scripting. So I just have a example here. Another command really useful is the cat command, like animal cat. Cat just takes the file and spits it out to the screen. And when it's a really long file, you type cat and then it just like scrolls on the screen for you. But when it's something short like this script, I just say cat and then I can look at the file. I don't have to open it up in an editor or anything. So you can see this script prompts me for an org, a metadata type, and then it's going to do this SF org list metadata. And in here, I'm putting in the metadata type I typed in and the alias that I provide. So if I run this script, and I might say MHD 24 scratch and metadata type, custom field, and it runs that for me. So it just ran that command, but it did it based on what I was prompting for. So scripting can really, really powerful like that. Any other questions before we talk about the last section here? So the last section is writing your own command lines, commands. So the Salesforce.sf command is extensible. So if there's something that you think, hey, this would be it would be really cool if this tool did this, and you have some experience in working with Node, for example, you can write your own command. So there's a command to actually generate the structure for a plugin, and then there's a command to generate the commands itself, command to generate flags. So some of the things I'm working on, this first one is an example I'm going to show you right here. Copy the URL to a clipboard. So when I do this -R for my org open -R, and it spits out that URL, I then have to go and find where it starts. So it's like, okay, right here, and I have to copy it to the end. I have to remember to copy everything if I want to give that to somebody. So I wrote a little script that would take that and or little command line plugin to take that and copy it to clipboard for me. I have one that creates and populates a scratch org, generates CSVs from profiles and that sort of thing. Basically, if you can write the code to do it, you can create your own command. And so I've already done that here. So I have this directory called MHD. There's lots of stuff in there, as you can see. I'm going to open that up in VS Code. Show you real quick. And zoom in. So this is the basics of a command. Let me just... so in this case, my command is called the MHD copy command. It only requires an org, so it requires a target org. And then when it runs, I take that target org, I get the connection, oops, I didn't want to do that. I get the connection to that target org. And it keeps popping up this help text. Get the connection to the target org, and then using that connection, I call a method called getAuthInfo, which gets me the authentication information, and that's stored in this authInfo. And then using that authInfo, I say get org front door URL. So that's that big long URL. And then I take that, I can do whatever I want with it. In this case, I'm taking it and writing it to the clipboard. So when I run this command, it's now just in my clipboard, and I can switch over to Slack or whatever and just do a paste and send it off to somebody. So that's an example of a pretty simple command, but something that I found useful. Okay. A little bit over. Any questions? Yes? How do you get to the Salesforce CLI? You go to developer.salesforce.com, and there's a link there where you can download the CLI for your operating system. It's a simple installer. It basically just installs, and it's good to go. Doesn't cost anything. It's a free product from Salesforce. Yes?
Does the site have a nice list of commands, like combinations of commands, for example, can you get it development at Salesforce.com?
Yeah, all the commands are documented. The command itself also is kind of self-documenting. So if I go here and I type in SF and I just hit enter, it gives me a big list of all the different commands that are available for that SF command. And then there's a command that you can use to install the autocomplete. It's called SF autocomplete. It's kind of weird, this is. But all the commands, if you say SF space auth space, and then just hit tab, you see like the subcommands under auth. So it's kind of self-documenting as well. So sometimes you can't remember, like, oh, what is that exact command that I want to do? You can there's documentation you can look at, but it also kind of documents itself.
For your writing your own plugin, you use the SF command object in the VS Code.
So writing my own plugin, it's not for VS Code, it's for the command line. So, so right now,
In your project, you use the SF command object, right? This is the like some kind of.
so the thing that generates that structure for me is this SF dev generate plugin that generates a structure for me. I then go and do my work, and then when I'm done and I want to test it, I can say plugin link. SF plugin link. Sorry, it's trying to autocomplete for me, and I'm trying not to do that. So I linked the MHD plugin, and then if I type SF, if I scroll up, now there's this MHD plugin, which is the thing that I just wrote. And if I say SF, MHD, oh, I need to be in the, if I say SF, MHD, copy, which was the name of the command, it actually copied it to the clipboard, and I can tell because if I do a paste, that's what's copied. So that's what the command is. But you have to, when you create it, you then have to install it in order for it to work.
That's all the time we have for questions right
Okay.
now. Everybody give Alan a big round of applause.
And I'm around if anyone has other questions.